All right, so we're diving into some Birlasoft Ltd today. You sent over a ton of stuff about them.
Yeah, their Q3 FY25
It
results.
looks like we've got press releases, earnings call transcripts, even the auditor's report.
You really want to get the full picture, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how they're doing.
Well, it's a good time for a deep dive, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just about the numbers themselves.
Right.
There's also a leadership transition happening,
Yeah. Interesting.
and some hints of some concerns from their clients.
Okay.
And there are whispers of some industry shifts that are happening that can impact even a financially sound company.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe we can start with the headline numbers.
Yeah, that's always a good place to begin.
So it looks like their revenue grew by 1.5% year on year.
Yeah, hitting 13,627 million.
Not bad, right?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay, how so?
When you look at the revenue in constant currency terms,
Right.
stripping away the impact of currency fluctuations,
Yeah.
there's actually a slight dip of 0.1%.
Oh, wow. So the strong US dollar is actually doing them a favor here,
Exactly.
making that rupee revenue look better.
Yeah, than the underlying performance.
Interesting.
And that weaker rupee actually boosts their profitability too because of how those dollars translate back. But it is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then their EBITDA margin stayed pretty steady at 12%,
Yeah.
which is especially impressive considering they gave everyone a company-wide salary increase.
Yeah, it seems like efficiency is how they're managing this,
Okay.
countering those higher personnel costs to keep that margin healthy.
Right.
But there's a twist here.
What's that?
Despite the stable margin, their profit for the period actually decreased by 8.3% year on year.
Wait, so the margin stays put, but the profit takes a dip?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
it's all about understanding the components.
Okay.
The profit decrease comes from a decline in what they're calling other income.
Other income.
And this gets interesting because that decline is directly linked to the depreciation of non-dollar currencies against the US dollar.
Ah, so this other income isn't just like loose change lying around.
Yeah.
It's actually tied to their global operations and how those different currencies perform.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this highlights just how vulnerable companies like Birlasoft are to these global currency swings.
Right. Especially with a significant portion of their revenue coming from outside the U.S.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if they need to look into some hedging strategies
Lady.
to counter that.
Yeah,
It's a good reminder that even a stable company can get caught in those global economic currents.
for sure.
But okay, let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
There was also a leadership change at Birlasoft, right?
Yeah. Arun Dinakar Rao,
Yeah.
their chief people officer.
Mm-hmm.
He is moving on to a different role within the company.
Okay.
And Priti Kataria will be stepping into his shoes,
Right.
taking over as CPO on February 12th.
That's interesting timing. Leadership transitions often signal a shift in strategy,
Yeah.
especially for a role as critical as CPO. Could this be connected to something else we saw? Those higher than usual furloughs.
Ooh.
The CEO, Angan Guha, he mentioned them,
Right.
particularly in the life sciences and manufacturing verticals.
Yeah, that's unusual for Birlasoft to have furloughs, especially in those sectors.
Mm.
Suggests that some external factors are at play here.
Okay.
Perhaps policy changes in the U.S.
Okay.
might be creating ripple effects.
Wow. So not even a company known for its stability is immune to those economic headwinds.
Nope.
Makes you think. But on the flip side, they did have a pretty strong quarter in terms of deal signings.
That's true, reaching $226 million in total contract value
Wow.
for both renewals and new deals.
Okay, so that's good. But if we dig a bit deeper,
Yeah.
we see that their revenue from their top 6 to 10 client accounts actually declined.
Yeah, by 14–15% year on year.
Wow. And the CEO even mentioned a potential new logo in Europe.
New client, yeah.
Yeah, in the manufacturing space.
Right.
But even a sizable deal, there might not be enough to get them back to that double-digit growth that everyone's looking for.
It's true.
Right. New logo. Sorry. Sometimes I forget that not everyone speaks fluent business jargon. It's a balancing act for them, right? Holding on to those key clients while also finding new avenues for growth.
Absolutely. And that new client in Europe suggests that they're actively seeking opportunities in manufacturing.
Even with the current challenges.
Yeah, even with those challenges. Are they anticipating a rebound?
Maybe.
Are they targeting a niche that is less affected by economic woes? It's a gamble worth watching.
Yeah, I agree with that. But hold on, let's rewind for a second. You mentioned that the revenue from their top clients declined, but their overall deal signings were strong.
Yeah.
Is that just because of these new deals, or is there something else at play?
It could be a combination of factors.
Okay.
Remember, those top client accounts make up a significant chunk of their revenue.
Right.
So even if they're bringing in new clients, if those existing relationships are weakening, that could spell trouble down the line.
Okay, so we're starting to see some potential cracks in the facade. On the one hand, they're managing their margins well and landing new deals, but on the other, they're facing currency headwinds, potential client issues, and those puzzling furloughs.
Exactly. And let's not forget the analyst chatter from the earnings call.
Oh, yeah.
They were asking some pretty tough questions about revenue growth, competition in their key service lines,
Okay.
and how Birlasoft plans to navigate this increasingly complex landscape.
It's like they're juggling a bunch of different balls in the air, and we're trying to figure out which ones are going to drop.
Yeah.
But before we get too overwhelmed, I think it's time for a break. We'll be back in a few minutes to delve even deeper into Birlasoft's story.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've laid out the groundwork. Birlasoft is facing some headwinds,
Yeah.
but they're also making some strategic moves.
Yeah.
It feels like there are a lot of moving pieces here. I'm trying to figure out how they all fit together.
It's like a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got these financial results,
Right.
leadership changes, client concerns,
Yeah.
and those broader industry trends all swirling around. But remember, the goal of this deep dive is to try to help you connect the dots and develop a clearer picture of what's really going on.
You're right. And one piece of the puzzle that's really sticking with me is that leadership change.
Yeah.
It just feels significant, a new chief people officer, right? When the company's dealing with these unusual furloughs.
I agree. It's worth paying attention to. Think about the role of a CPO.
Yeah.
They're responsible for shaping the company culture, talent acquisition, employee development.
Right.
A new CPO often means a new approach to all of those things.
So could this new CPO, Priti Kataria, be tasked with steering the company through these choppy waters?
Oh.
Maybe even finding ways to address those underlying issues that are leading to the furloughs?
That's a very plausible scenario.
Right.
Perhaps the previous CPO's approach wasn't aligned with the company's current needs.
Okay.
Or maybe Kataria brings a fresh perspective, new ideas about how to attract and retain top talent in this rapidly changing industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it ties back to that bigger question we keep coming back to. How is Birlasoft going to adapt to the future of the IT services sector?
Exactly. And speaking of adaptation, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, AI and automation.
Right.
Remember those pointing questions from the analysts during the earnings call?
Hell yeah.
They were laser focused on Birlasoft's strategy for navigating this technological revolution.
Yeah, I remember thinking it felt like they were putting the CEO on the spot. They wanted to know how Birlasoft is going to keep up, how they plan to stay competitive when AI can potentially do so much of the work that their employees currently do.
It's a valid concern.
Right.
The IT services sector is ripe for disruption, and companies that fail to adapt risk being left behind. But remember, the CEO did emphasize Birlasoft's commitment to investing in capabilities.
Right. He talked about retraining employees, developing new skills, and basically finding ways to leverage AI to their advantage. But honestly, at the time, it sounded a bit like corporate jargon to me.
I understand your skepticism.
Yeah.
It's easy for companies to talk a big game about embracing new technologies, but actually implementing those changes is a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. So how do we cut through the jargon and figure out if Birlasoft is genuinely prepared for this AI-powered future? What are some concrete steps they could be taking?
That's the million-dollar question. Let's put on our analytical hats and think about it. They could be investing in training programs that teach their employees how to work alongside AI tools, how to use those tools to enhance their productivity and efficiency.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's not just about retraining existing employees, right?
Right.
They'll also need to attract new talent with specialized skills in AI, machine learning, data analytics, all those buzzwords.
Absolutely. They need to position themselves as an attractive employer for tech-savvy individuals who are passionate about working at the forefront of innovation. That might involve revamping the recruitment strategies, partnering with universities, sponsoring hackathons, things like that.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, retraining current employees, attracting new talent, and probably even restructuring certain roles and responsibilities to better align with this AI-powered future.
Precisely. And it's not just about technical skills. Remember, Birlasoft is in the business of providing services to clients. As AI takes on more routine tasks, their employees will need to develop those uniquely human skills that are harder to automate.
Things like creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, all those qualities that make us well human.
Exactly. They'll need to become more consultative, more strategic, more focused on building relationships and understanding the nuanced needs of their clients. It's about shifting from being task doers to becoming trusted advisors.
So in a way, this AI revolution could actually force Birlasoft to become a better company, one that's more focused on value creation and client satisfaction.
It's certainly a possibility. It's like that old saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a major disruption to push companies out of their comfort zones and force them to innovate and evolve.
Okay, so we're starting to get a clearer picture of how AI could impact Birlasoft, both in terms of their internal operations and their relationships with clients. But let's zoom back out for a moment. Remember, we were also talking about those client concerns and the potential for a new client in Europe.
Right. Those are crucial pieces of the puzzle as well. Let's connect those dots and see how they fit into this bigger picture of Birlasoft's future.
Sounds good to me. So the decline in revenue from those top client accounts, what are some possible explanations? Is it just those U.S. policy changes that we discussed earlier, or could it be something more?
It's likely a combination of factors. External economic pressures are definitely playing a role, but there could also be internal challenges at play. Perhaps Birlasoft is facing increased competition from other IT service providers, or maybe they're not meeting the evolving needs of their clients.
So they need to figure out what's driving those declines and address those issues head on. Otherwise, they risk losing those valuable client relationships.
Exactly. They need to be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
They need to be having those tough conversations with their clients, understanding their pain points, and demonstrating that they're the right partner to help them navigate these uncertain times.
And what about that potential new client in Europe?
Yeah.
The CEO mentioned it was in the manufacturing sector, which we know is facing some challenges right now. Is it risky for Birlasoft to be pursuing clients in a sector that's not exactly booming?
It's a calculated risk, for sure. But remember, risk and reward often go hand in hand. If Birlasoft can successfully land this client and demonstrate their value, it could open up a whole new market for them.
So they're betting on their ability to buck the trend, to find opportunities where others see challenges. It's a bold move, but it could pay off big time if they pull it off.
Absolutely. And it speaks to their willingness to diversify their client base, to not put all their eggs in one basket. It's a smart strategy, especially in a world that's becoming increasingly volatile and unpredictable.
All right, so we've got this new CPO potentially shaking things up internally, AI pushing them to evolve and adapt client relationships, to nurture and strengthen, and new markets to explore. It's a lot to take in.
It's true. But remember, we're not looking for simple answers here.
Yeah.
We're diving deep, exploring the complexities, and trying to make sense of this ever-evolving landscape.
And I have to say, I'm really enjoying the journey, even though it's a bit like riding a roller coaster at times.
Okay.
But before we get carried away, let's shift gears and focus on something that we haven't discussed much yet, Birlasoft's financial performance and what it tells us about their overall health and stability.
Excellent point. The numbers can often reveal hidden truths, especially when we look beyond the headlines and dig into the details. Let's put on our financial analyst hats and see what those numbers are telling us about Birlasoft's present and future.
Sounds like a plan. Let's crunch those numbers and see what insights we can glean. All right, so let's talk numbers. We've covered a lot of ground already, but we can't ignore the financials. They're the backbone of any business after all.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The numbers tell a story. And sometimes it's a story that's different from the narrative we might get from, press releases or even executive comments.
Exactly. So let's put on our financial detective hats and see what we can uncover. Where should we start?
Well, we already touched on their revenue and profitability, but one metric that often gets overlooked is cash flow.
Right.
It's the lifeblood of any company. And Birlasoft seems to be doing pretty well in that department.
Right. I remember seeing something about that in the materials you sent over. They have a really low days sales outstanding DSO, right?
Exactly. Their DSO is currently at 53 days, which is one of the best in the industry.
Wow.
It means they're collecting cash from their clients quickly,
Okay.
which is a sign of a healthy business.
Okay, that's good to hear. But we also need to consider the potential risks and challenges they might face in the future. What are some red flags we should be looking out for?
One thing that caught my eye is their reliance on a relatively small number of large clients. Remember, we saw that their revenue from their top 6 to 10 clients actually declined this quarter.
Right. And that makes them vulnerable, doesn't it? If they lose one or two of those big clients, it could have a significant impact on their overall revenue.
Exactly. It underscores the importance of diversifying their client base. They need to be actively pursuing new clients. particularly in those high-growth sectors that we talked about earlier.
So they need to be striking that balance between nurturing those existing relationships and also seeking out new opportunities. It's like walking a tightrope.
It is, and they need to do it while also managing their margins effectively.
Right.
Remember, we saw that their EBITDA margin held steady this quarter. But there are potential headwinds on the horizon.
Like what?
Well, for starters, there's increasing competition in the IT services sector, which could put pressure on pricing.
Yeah.
And we also need to consider the impact of those currency fluctuations that we discussed earlier.
Right. If those non-dollar currencies continue to weaken against the US dollar, it could eat into their profitability even if they're managing their costs well.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for them to think strategically about their global operations and explore ways to mitigate that currency risk.
So there's a lot to keep an eye on. It's like a constant juggling act trying to balance all these different factors and make sure the company's moving in the right direction.
It is.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of business, isn't it? It's about navigating uncertainty, making tough decisions, and adapting to a constantly changing landscape.
And it's about having the right information and insights to guide those decisions, which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
By understanding Birlasoft's strengths, weaknesses, and the broader market forces at play, we can make more informed judgments about their future prospects.
So after all this analysis, what's your overall assessment of Birlasoft? Are you bullish, bearish, or somewhere in between?
I'm cautiously optimistic. They're clearly facing some challenges, but they're also taking steps to address them. They have a strong track record of profitability and cash flow. They're investing in their capabilities, and they're actively seeking new growth opportunities.
So they're not out of the woods yet, but they're definitely on the right track.
I'd say so. But it's important to remember that the future is never certain. There are always unforeseen challenges and opportunities that can emerge.
True. Which is why it's so important to stay informed, to keep learning, and to never stop asking questions.
Absolutely. And to never underestimate the power of a good deep dive.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of Birlasoft, their challenges, and the broader IT services sector.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, the insights you've gained from this deep dive can be applied to other companies and industries as well. The principles of financial analysis, strategic thinking, and understanding market trends are universal.
So what's the key takeaway for our listener? What should they be thinking about as they continue to research Birlasoft and other companies in this space?
I'd say the key takeaway is this. Don't just look at the headlines or the surface-level data. Dig deeper, ask questions, and connect the dots. The more you understand about a company, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions.
Great advice. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to explore.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. And to our listener, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.
Until next time, happy diving.